sometimes you need to start somewhere and you need to do it the hard way first to work out how to do it the easy way. Saying we've got too big an area, it's too big a project, it's too big an aim is not a good enough reason not to start doing it.
Sheridan Alm is at the helm of the Riverland Stars Reach Vineyard and recently took out Innovative Vineyard of the Year at the Young Gun of Wine Awards. Sheridan's family history in the region stretches back 6 generations, with her and husband Craig now carrying the torch into unknown territory. As a mum of 5, Sheridan's always on the go, and if she's not careful, can run out of time and energy to look after herself when parenting and wine come first. As her latest award suggests, they pride themselves on doing things differently at Stars Reach, with a focus on alternative varieties and reimagining the classic varieties, all done through a framework of sustainability that sets them up for success. Here's Sheridan.
Welcome to Healthy Minds, Healthy Vines, the wellbeing podcast for growers, proudly brought to you by the Wine Grape Council of South Australia and sponsored by PIRSA. Hosted by award-winning mental health podcaster Callum McPherson and wine columnist for The Australian, Nick Ryan.
Sheridan, firstly, congratulations on your Young Gun of Wine award and ensuing TV fame.
Congratulations on just being a young gun for a start.
Thank you.
Can you tell us what you were awarded for most recently?
So we were lucky to win the Innovative Vineyard of the Year, the Groundbreaker Award for Young Gun of Wine, which is all about celebrating the magic that happens in the vineyard. We hear winemakers talk a lot about what they do with the fruit in the winery that makes the wine so special. But my winemaker will tell me it's the fruit that makes the difference, and I'll take a bit of credit for that too. So the award celebrates sustainability and using innovative practices and enhancing biodiversity and all of that kind of thing. Holistic farming, things that we don't think about very much in the vineyard because it's just how we farm. But once you start telling the story, it's lots of fun.
Yeah. So when you get an award like that and you get a nod and people are appreciating the way you do things, how do you receive that? Because you've won a few awards in your time, and like you said, you're not really thinking about that. But is it sort of like, oh yeah, well, actually we are really good?
I'd like to think. Well, I know that I'm not the only person doing those things, and there's lots of other people that would be more worthy of the award than I. But I somehow have these silly moments and put my hand up to have a go. I feel it's really important to tell the story of our region and our industry and our community. So I'd like to think that while I may not actually have the Vineyard of the Year, that it's about telling the stories of the kinds of things that are happening on the more progressive vineyards around the country.
So what do you think it is that judges responded to, with what you're doing?
I think in the end, the difference between our vineyard and some of the other amazing vineyards that were up for the award was the scale of what we were doing on our property. I guess we're doing things on quite a scale compared to a small vineyard that might be beautifully manicured and everything's done perfectly and by the textbook. However, in the Riverland, we tend to not be able to do things to that level. Our returns don't warrant that. It's not the style of grape growing that we do practice realistically. And, when we're talking about hectares of revegetation versus number of trees, it brings, I guess, into light the opportunity for the Riverland to market itself as an extremely biodiverse, sustainable region. It's an outback style region that has this connection to massive areas of national parks uncomparable to other areas in South Australia, and we're not telling that story.
there's innovation and there's innovation, and I like this idea you're talking about, that it's regionally specific innovating. It's seeing what you are and where you are and working out how to innovate in that situation, in that context. And it's not simply, oh, that's what they're doing in somewhere else, so we're just going to transplant it exactly to where we are. We're going to adapt to what we've got and who we are.
And it seems like there's such a groundswell of innovation at the moment, just from the conversations we've been having with people. So many people are trying to do different things. What are your thoughts on the opportunity to create at the moment, and I suppose some of the momentum around that?
There's a lot of ag tech innovation happening at the moment, which I find very exciting, being on a vineyard that has a fair few rows to go up and down. I guess, when we started doing some revegetation on our property, it was me and my kids out planting vines, planting native plants under vine by hand on our weekend.
That's when it's handy to have 5 of them.
Yeah, but it still
but even
wasn't
then,
enough.
It's not going to do hundreds and hundreds of hectares.
It still wasn't enough, but I was at great risk of them all never talking to me again. So when I see things like spraying the slurry of native plant seeds under the vine row that's happening in the Eco Vineyards projects at the moment. Well, I was actually showing one of my children the other day who helped me with the last planting, and she said, "Hallelujah, Mum, we could be part of that. Can I hold the hose?" But yeah, what I'm saying is, it sometimes you need to start somewhere, and you need to do it the hard way first to work out how to do it the easy way. Saying we've got too big an area, it's too big a project, it's too big an aim, is not a good enough reason not to start doing it. So
in a way, the impact's sort of even bigger when you're doing it on that kind of scale. It's even a greater imperative almost, for a vineyard on that scale to be looking at ways to innovate and be more sustainable than someone with their little half an acre, somewhere.
Yeah, it is, because ultimately these sustainable style practices are meant to be bringing our cost of production down. I'm a true believer that being environmentally focused should be making your bottom line look better, and it can, but there's probably a bit of a perception out there that it costs money, and I think it does cost money to start off with, but we're getting better at finding easier ways of doing it. But in the long run, like the Sustainable Wine Grape Growing Australia framework shows us, benchmarking and micromanaging your inputs in the vineyard should save you money, help you identify inefficiencies in your production.
Are you seeing it pay off?
I'm seeing it pay off probably in ways that I can't quite measure yet. They're just visual observations of, more beneficial insects or less sunburn in the canopy from having native plants under vine. It's all very anecdotal at this point, or perhaps being able to get onto that land quicker after a rain event to put a preventative spray on for powdering downy mildew. Things like that, which I can't quite yet quantify.
Can you talk a bit about your history in pest and disease management?
Yeah, when I studied environmental management at Roseworthy years ago, and it was actually called natural resource management when I started, so I was a nat rat, and then the last year I was there, it got changed to environmental management, which sounds a little bit
don't
nicer.
Quite have the same ring.
So I'm half nat rat, and did a few viticulture subjects at the Wade as well. But I went and worked for an independent consultancy in Loxton after uni called the Fruit Doctors, and they were very much about integrated pest management. James Altman, my boss, was like a Churchill Fellow and had been all over the world learning about good bugs and bad bugs, and runs a huge business now that consults all over the world in botanic gardens and horticultural systems on biological control of pests and integrated farming. So really great place to learn about good bugs and bad bugs. That's where it all starts, because the sprays that we use in vineyards do either a lot to disrupt or smooth over the way nature responds in a production system. So it's one of the first things that you can control in your farming system that will affect your cost of production and how nature is responding to you messing around with it. So reducing what you do as much as possible is a huge part of managing any agricultural system.
Tell us a bit more about good bugs and bad bugs and how you can use good bugs to your advantage.
Okay, so I guess it's not very pronounced in a Riverland vineyard system because we tend not to need to spray for insect pests compared to other regions. We are pruning our canopies to have open and loose bunches, open canopies. So if we have some things like apple moth or mealybug or vine scale and the honeydew associated with them, the warm, dry climate and lack of rain helps with drying out any berries that have any damage from those pests. So while there may be those pests present, they're not creating any economic damage.
Yep.
In the past, a farmer would have gone out and sprayed. And unfortunately, chemical wholesalers would still try to encourage them to do that. But there's, economic thresholds of what you could tolerate in your vineyard, which is different in different regions. In another region where they're growing their grapes for a different style of wine and they might want tighter bunches and more prone to the damage that might happen between a bunch, and they don't then have the weather to help dry out the bunch when that damage has happened, and then you start having fungal disease problems. I get it's they need to do something about that culturally or using a synthetic chemical. But Riverland is ideally placed with its warm, dry climate to manage all of those things culturally without any intervention.
Okay, but there's always a flip side to any coin like that. So the advantages you have of being there, are pretty evident, but some of the disadvantages that you face. Tell us a little bit about that and where you can innovate to mediate that.
I guess the disadvantages in the Riverland are immediately seen as being a warm, dry area that has little rainfall. So we're obviously very dependent on the River Murray for water, and our electricity costs are huge. But I don't know, I don't dwell on these things for too long. I think there's always a way to flip it.
Yeah.
I see our lack of rainfall as an opportunity to be able to manage water really well, because we are choosing every time when we're going to apply that water. Water doesn't just come about by itself. It's part of a water cycle, and there's, no one's making any new water. It's all the same water, whether it comes from the river or the sky or a dam or a tap, it doesn't matter. So being able to have complete management of our water, I think, is a plus. We're not getting, very rarely we're getting a huge deluge of water at the wrong time. And if we are, you can generally dry things out pretty quickly afterwards.
There are a lot of, industries in that system, as reliant, if not more reliant, on that water than viticulture. Has viticulture got a leadership role to play in the way that anyone who's within that system is operating? What can viticulture teach, other operators along the river?
I think viticulture has been a forerunner in state-of-the-art irrigation systems during the really good times. But I would actually say that other industries are overtaking it now because it's not the highest value producer per megalitre of water at the moment, unfortunately. But hopefully those times will return. The wine industry can play a leadership role because of the sheer number of people involved in its industry. The Riverland, while it is a fruit salad area and grows other horticultural crops, still very much a wine grape growing community. There's many other regions within our state that are also very reliable on the River Murray. There's a number of regions that can show a lot of leadership around use of water in vineyards, definitely.
Yeah, and again, and one of the obvious ways, we've seen the Riverland's been a leader in, thinking about more appropriate varieties to be planted. I mean, Chardonnay's probably not long for this world, in that context. But what varieties excite you about for the Riverland's future?
Yeah, I see where you're headed with that. There's definitely a range of varieties, the Mediterranean style varieties that are going great guns in the Riverland. I think the Riverland showed a fair bit of leadership years ago in helping get these varieties on the ground with the likes of Ashley Ratcliffe and Chalmers, etc. So there's definitely some change that could happen in the ground with having less Shiraz, Cabernet, Chardonnay. I still think there's a place for those varieties from the Riverland, because there'll always be a level of entry point product required of those varieties, and it's the bread and butter of the majors, although maybe that all needs to change at the moment. But I think varieties like Fiano and Nera Diavolo and Montepulciano are going to become a lot more mainstream. However, that means that we need to not make the same mistake we've made before and just let them run along at their own steam and not put any effort into making sure that that's long-term sustainable. I'm also really passionate about some of the older varieties that have been in the Riverland for a really long time, like Grenache and Mataro, and even Chardonnay. We've been growing them how they would grow them in the other regions, instead of growing them how they should be grown in our region, and making wines that reflect our terroir and our I guess our natural attributes. So
what are those sort of more Riverland focused approaches to those varieties?
Not overcropping them, and that's by all means not sacrificing huge amounts of crops. It's just letting the vine find some natural balance. I think that there is a big future for those varieties on the lighter, sandier soils, especially Grenache and Fiano. Some of highest quality grapes around the world are found on sandy soil. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, pruning and managing the crop for a lighter crop, full balance, but picking the fruit when it's on the way up before it hits being overripe, especially true for Grenache, picking on taste rather than baume, and then you seem to get less. You still get the fully developed flavours and body, but you don't seem to get the heat with a variety like Grenache. Keeps the freshness and vibrancy in the wine, but it also appeals to the new wine drinkers, I think, and they're the people that my brand is focused on anyway. I'm not much interested in the people that have such well-developed palates that that they're drinking at this level. That's great, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a heap of beverage drinkers out there that could really be learning about wine, starting off with Riverland wine. Yeah.
So how important then is it for, maybe you're a large grower, but a small winemaker? I mean, but those growers who are winemakers in the Riverland to be able to say, this is what we can do with our fruit, rather than say some of the big players who are just, branded commodity wine that doesn't really tell a story about, its Riverland origins. How important is it for those of you putting, quality wine into bottle, proudly announcing its Riverland origins? How important is it for you to set a standard?
think it's really important. And even the majors in the Riverland will say that. And I've found of quite supportive of what the smaller brands are doing. I've had one large local winemaker say it's like the spice and the fruit cake. We're the fruit cake, but you guys are the spice and fruit, or the icing on top kind of thing. It's really hard for them to tell those genuine stories that connect people to the land. But it's much easier for smaller winemakers to do that. But it still contributes to their story down the track, a regional brand story.
Yeah.
So definitely very important. I also think it's important in terms of ensuring the long-term productivity of the wine grape growers in the region. As these smaller winemakers grow and their markets expand, they need more fruit, and then they start to buy fruit from local wine grape growers, giving them an option other than the majors.
Yeah.
So, the likes of Ashley Ratcliffe at Ricoterra and Jim Marquis at Mallee Estate, they're buying quite a lot of fruit locally. We've started buying a little bit of fruit, and that is not going to solve the problem that we're having right now, but it helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to find out a bit more about you, Sheridan, did you always plan to build your life around ag?
Yeah, definitely. I've always been interested in ag and being outside. Yeah, my family have farmed along the River Murray, different styles of farming for 6 generations, and there's definitely a real feeling of connection to the land. I experienced as a child, spent a lot of time with my grandparents and all of my uncles as farmers, and just loved all the stories about the river. And I'm a tree hugger at heart. I just love all the why of things happen and what's different and what's changing. Love it.
Tell us about the foundation that your parents laid.
Yeah, I guess my mum and dad they're both pretty hardworking. They're a very good team. My father's managed to run a pretty successful contracting business as well. So that's given us a bit of a diverse business background. And when it comes to being a farmer, I think it's really important to realise that it is actually a profession. It's not a lifestyle, and you need to have a certain level of business skills. I feel like growers sometimes forget that, and they become used to a certain way of things happening. And I'm not saying there's a sense of entitlement, but none of us ever want things to change. So when we come across times like this, we get upset that things are changing and try and find others to blame and why. But every single industry is doing it tough at the moment. The wine industry is not alone. We're just harder hit perhaps because of all of that stuff that's happened globally with China and the likes. It's hit harder.
I believe your dad actually built a lot of the state's corporate vineyards.
Yeah.
So he's been innovative in his own way.
He's been very innovative. He's a bit of a nuts and bolts man. He's, invented different machines for drilling rock in the hard rock that we have in South Australian vineyards. And he was running, 6-7 teams of men around the state building vineyards and drilling rock for probably 40 years, not just during the wine boom, but he also he started off agricultural farm fencing, diversified into viticulture, diversified into building guardrail along roadsides. He didn't say, "Oh, sheep industry's buggered. Okay, poor me. Let's feel sorry for ourselves." He found a new industry to take his skills to, develop new machinery, change things. And
has he always been vocal about that being his philosophy as well, or has he just led with that sort of action and you've seen the way he's always adapted and perhaps...
Both. He's always explained what he was doing. Growing up in a family business, all of that stuff gets discussed around the kitchen table. And I know my dad was brought up the same way, that everything was discussed around the kitchen table, and the decisions about why they were doing things on the farm were explained to small children even. So it was the same at our kitchen table. Dad would explain to us, I'm going to see the bank tomorrow and I'm going to ask for some money to help me build a new machine to do da 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 da. And then we're going to try and get this job. What do you think about that? And so we'd have these discussions all the time, and there was so much to be learnt from it. And I also think Dad actually learnt interesting things from us kids about what we thought about what he was doing, perhaps angles that he had
some out of the box thinking.
And I get that with my kids as well now. It's just amazing what comes from looking at things from a different angle.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've got a busy kitchen table yourself.
Yeah, definitely busy kitchen table. Yeah, our older three children are 22, 20 and 18. So they're actually starting to participate in our business in some shape or form, in the role, the careers they're taking on. One's a diesel mechanic, one's
handy to have on farm.
yes, and one's studying business design and marketing and working for an Adelaide Hills winery on their PR part-time, and one's doing accounting and working for an accounting firm part-time. So they're all following in that direction of small business, I think, but they all do little bits and pieces within the business. And my husband and I ask them for advice and get them involved, and it keeps them feeling like they're part of the team, even while they might not be.
Yeah, we were hearing similar from the Follett brothers about just how much the family business is expanding, and it's not just the vineyard. In their case, there's the restaurant, there's the marketing angle, there's the accounting angle, there's so many parts to it. And I guess seems like there's more and more opportunities for the next generation to go out and do pretty much whatever, and then potentially be able to bring it back and use it.
Definitely. I don't want any of our children to come straight back in the business yet. I want them to have some time away. I want them to learn what it's like to work
Go and
for
pinch someone else's
else.
good ideas and bring them back.
That as well. Yeah. Won't complain about that. And I want them to learn how to do as they're told.
Yeah.
And I think they already know that, but learn how to be good employees, as well as, I think, is how you learn how to be a good boss, because they could be the boss one day. And I want them to bring something home into the business, which is, I guess, the philosophy that my dad had with me. Like, I was probably never going to come home and be a fencing contractor, but what skills could I bring into the business that would help with our family's investment approach?
And you got 5 kids all up. How have you juggled being a mum with that many children and doing everything you do over the years?
I won't make it sound like it's easy. It's not. It's been really hard, especially when you're working in an industry that's male dominated. It's been very hard. On one hand, being a self-employed grape grower means that I've had flexibility to take my kids to work around them, but it also then means working really long hours to make up for that.
You don't switch off at 5 o'clock, off at 5 o'clock when you're self-employed.
No.
It is the whole time. I mean, there's flexibility, but it never goes away.
It was interesting because I was listening to a podcast this morning about Megan Mill with wine, and they were talking about the gender pay gap stuff, and it got me thinking about all of that stuff in the wine industry. And I think we actually have a really, really amazing opportunity to make the wine industry a friendly and inclusive place for women to work compared to a lot of other industries. And I'm not sure if we're doing it really badly, or we're not doing it really well yet, but there's an opportunity to improve it a lot more. So I I think we can be doing a much better job of that. And that probably starts with people like me changing the expectations I have from myself of what I do in our business and how many roles I take on and how many gaps I fill.
What would you like to see improve?
I guess the things I would like to see improve would be the facilitating of, some demonstration of how it can work in terms of helping young women return to work after having children in a winery or a vineyard situation. That we tend to have this thought in farming that you have to be in a tractor 8 or 10 hours a day or whatever it is to be doing the hard work, and we don't give value to, say, the work that's done in the office or the running around or all the other things that gets done. It doesn't get seen as hard work, but we could be much more open to saying, hey, you return to work during school hours. Yes, you can go down the road and breastfeed your baby at childcare if you want to come back to work at 6 months. We can work with all of those things.
Yeah.
We talk about it and we set it up so it works for everyone, instead of just saying, nah, that's not how the other guys work, so we're not going to do that.
Yeah, and then the one thing you hear from so many winemaking mothers is, it's the vintage is the thing, and there's that sort of machoification of just go hard through vintage, and it's all consuming, and there's nothing else happening for that period in your life. It's just bang 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 go through vintage.
You've got to be bug-eyed and on the edge.
And how do you do that with
vintage?
Yeah, with a small child that's relying on you as well.
Yeah. Respect that women are bringing up the next generation of wonderful winemakers and great growers, we hope. So they've got to be at home looking after their children at some point, and we shouldn't be expecting them to rip their kids out of bed at 6 a.m. to get them to OSH in the morning just so they can go and stand around the coffee machine with the blokes.
Yeah.
When getting to work at 8:30 might get the same amount of work done. I think, there's big questions we will need to ask ourselves around, what is working effectively, what is using time effectively, and how that works for different people. But we really need to, I guess, open our eyes up to the individuals in our workforce and their personalities and their values to make that
and some
happen.
of the unique pressure points that wine has that we can't necessarily pull a program across from another industry and try and apply that broadly across wine, but define wine industry specific solutions to those problems.
Yes. There's current practices we have that just wouldn't work for a woman. There's, with a baby to look after, like being out in a tractor at night time, unless there's someone at home, is not going to work. But managing things from a distance, using all the technology we have, can't hurt. Obviously, access to childcare is a huge thing as well.
Yeah.
I've been involved with 2 local childcare expansions as chair of their committee, so I've been there, done that. There's still a problem with access to childcare.
And we just have to have celibate, June, Julys and August, so no one's having babies around vintage either.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've had 2 vintage babies. Yeah, and I'm probably my own worst enemy in terms of what I expected of myself. Working up to the day, then being back at work a week later with a baby on my back. But I could do that. That was okay. It was my workplace. But why couldn't we make that okay
somewhere
else? Obviously, there's places where it might not be safe, and safety is a big.
But even when you say it's your workplace, you can do it. No one's going to stop you doing it. But it's still, there's got to be things you learnt through that process. You went, this is actually even harder than I thought it was going to be.
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely hard. For most of the day, it worked really well, but there were parts of the day where I didn't have enough hands, most definitely. And that's where I guess having a workforce, I guess, ethos around not having a one-size-fits-all approach would be really valuable. But because I was my own boss, I didn't have someone saying, "Hey, Sheridan, you can't do all those three things at once."
Yeah, but you probably end up neglecting yourself too, because you're worried about looking after a baby. Motherhood is hard, vintage is hard. You're layering them on top of each other, and then you're probably forgetting to look after yourself, which is kind of crucial because both things fall apart if you're not.
Yeah,
that was my next question: is how do you go with the self-care piece, and do you carve out some time for you? Because I imagine usually it's about everyone else, right? But if your cup runneth over, you can't manage other people.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really bad at. I'd be a real hypocrite to give advice on that. My self-care has been participating on industry boards.
Shit, that's perverse.
That's been my fun time. And I'm not doing that at the moment. So yeah, when you're in a house and your husband is at work at 6 o'clock and home at 5 or 6 o'clock, it's definitely hard as a mum to find time for yourself. Babies and young children are hard, but it gets especially hard when you've got teenagers and all the running around they need.
Does it all get a bit much at times?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm not too bad at getting help in. I know what my limits are, and these comments are probably not things that might sound helpful to a male grape grower, but I'm getting a cleaner in and getting someone to help with different things like picking children up and things like that has
give you some time.
Has been an absolute must, so that I'm not trying to squeeze as much work into a smaller time frame.
Have you always done that, or has that been a recent revelation?
It's probably been a recent revelation. I had more energy when I was younger, and I tried to do it all, but I learnt that it didn't work well.
Do you struggle a bit with that though, just giving up any jobs to someone else?
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy because it's quite confronting dealing with how someone else does things that you've done for a long time. And this would ring true for any grape grower that's employed a tractor driver to help him out. You've all of a sudden got to get used to how someone else does things, that perhaps you're not communicating what you want very well, and you need to improve that.
I suppose there can be pressure you put on yourself, knowingly or unknowingly, that you should be able to do it all and wear all those hats all the time, and perhaps you tell yourself that.
Yeah, that's a problem. I think a lot of people in small business have pretty high expectations of themselves, but I think in the end we've got to come back to what is actually within our control and what's not. No, I guess that's where my parents have been helpful, because they've run a small business as they're like a dynamic duo, those two together. They've run a business so well and supported one another so well, but they're pretty clear about what they can't do anything about. And I think of one example when we were hit by a hailstorm November 2019, and I remember driving out to mum and dad's and going in and saying, "Do you want to come out and have a look, Dad?" And I was all in a panic. And he said, "Nah."
Yeah, what's he going to do?
"Nah, it's nothing you can do about it." He said, "Don't even go and look for a few days. Go home." But I didn't. Yeah.
Easier said than done.
And you could just go and get yourself depressed at the damage you see. And
oh, yeah, it was terrible. But then I realised why he
Yeah.
told me to do that, and I didn't go and look for a few days. I let it sit. Yeah.
Shit happens.
Shit happens. Yeah.
Do you feel like you've been developing skills though as you've gone along in being a mum and also managing your business, and like are you getting better at stuff? Are you conscious of things that you'd like to improve? But
I hope you're not getting worse.
Yeah. Oh, are you saying the same? What are you?
No, I'm definitely getting better. Yeah, I am a bit of a perfectionist, so I used to probably get quite wound up about things not being just right, especially when I'd had to delegate things out in my younger years. But I just let it go now. I've learnt to let things go. Yeah, that's something that I've had to learn the hard way, I guess. Yeah, I've learnt that if I don't, it affects your health physically. You know, you start to feel anxious about everything, and it's hard to get anything done. So definitely, I have invested some time in self-care in terms of skills to help me, breathe through situations that aren't going to change the world. Yeah.
And you're delegating, as you say, which makes a difference. And I suppose ultimately you want longevity, and you know that in order to keep doing what you're doing and get the most out of your business and follow those aspirations, you have to find a way to look after yourself and not just brush under the rug for decades, because it'll get to the point where you fall in a heap and then none of what you want to do will work. So it sounds like you're figuring out how to do that along the way.
Figuring out, yeah. It doesn't always work perfectly.
No, of course
Sometimes
not.
we need a reset, most definitely. But it's, I guess, having people around you, having friends and family around you to help you identify those times when you're pushing it a bit too hard. And, hey, Sheridan, do you need help with that? It's okay to ask for help. Yeah.
Is there anything in particular that you'll go and do for a reset when you sort of really start feeling like, all right, I need to take myself away for a while? Or do you have any sort of practice around that?
It's probably taking the time to go for a drive around the vineyard with mum and dad and my husband Craig. That's always helpful. And to say, hey, that looks really good, look at that. That's not working really well, but I reckon we can fix it. Full of positives rather than seeing everything that's wrong. We deliberately go out and look for the positives and pat one another on the back, I guess. Yeah. Celebrate small wins. I probably spend more time with my children now that I'm older. And when I say spend more time with them, not taking them out, giving them stuff, doing stuff with them, more actually spending time
Just
with them.
being there.
Yeah, I've kind of learned it's not really the stuff that matters, it's the what that matters. Yeah.
Being present.
Yes. Yeah, and of course I'd not really into running or anything like that, but don't mind walking. But I tend to walk around the vineyard if anything. Can't just walk, but if I'm walking around the vineyard, it's all right because I feel like I'm doing something, and it's still that same breathing and connection.
Oh, it's better than the treadmill.
Yeah, better than the treadmill. Yeah. A lot safer when you've got a house full of kids too.
That's right. So looking towards the future for the Riverland, what are you seeing for yourself and for the region more broadly?
To be honest, I'm very worried about what's going to happen in the very short term in our region. I feel like we're in for some really big changes, and I don't have an idea of what the outcome should be because I don't know enough about how it affects every person in our industry. But a real big issue, I think, at the moment is the number of farmers that we have, over the age of 70, 75. They're in desperate straits at the moment, don't have a home for their fruit, don't know what the future will be, don't know if the winery that's going to take their grapes is going to be there by vintage.
And maybe not at a point in their lives where a reset is really, there might be, other people at younger stages of their life can go, well, maybe we think about what we do with the land differently. But
it's a bit too late for them to diversify, and they don't want to diversify. They don't probably want to leave their home.
Yeah. And proud and good grape
probably
growers.
Don't have superannuation, but they have water. And I think, one thing that government could or should do is really step in and get involved with how the water asset in our region is managed so that the region doesn't lose that water asset. The growers don't lose it either, but they're able to generate an income from it. Would mean a lot for their dignity. They'd still be able to call themselves a grower, which is their identity, and their superannuation would be taken care of. But that whole idea of water leasebacks seems to be a bit too out the box for government to digest, unfortunately, but I think it would save them money. And there does seem to be a need for some kind of intervention here. It can't just be left to fall apart. No, there's seriously growers who, once their last grape payment comes in, that might be their last.
Yeah,
that's what the situation is looking like for some growers in the Riverland. So if they haven't already been speaking to someone about getting some kind of help, they'll have no money, like literally to buy food. I don't think, let alone pay interest and for access to water and electricity and things like that. So there's that really heart-wrenching story about the Riverland that is about to unfold. Unfortunately, we've had a couple of chances to fix it before, but we've messed it up.
What went wrong?
I think too many people in industry rooms wanting things done their way.
Yep.
Wanting things to happen tomorrow rather than selling the idea properly and letting people come along with them. Too many people wanting things done their way alone. But I don't know how you change that. That's always going to happen in any boards, even at a community level. There's always someone there.
Self-interest wins out.
Yeah. And it means that no change gets across the table because no one's considered how their idea, which might be a really good idea, no one's considered how it affects other people and how to manage those expectations. At the same time, while all of this really terrible people stuff is happening on the ground, there's some huge opportunities for the Riverland at the moment in telling its story and turning things around, especially telling that environmental management story. Huge opportunity there. We are a region that can adapt quickly and easily to the fashion side of the wine industry. And I guess with the right leadership in some local wine companies, we could be doing that. We've just got to work out who those people are and back them. Yeah.
We have to be honest and open about, a short-term pain through the Riverland, but the long-term opportunity is still there. There's still real optimism and real cause for optimism in the Riverland.
Definitely, if we can all just hang on. The excitement I've seen in the marketplace for Australian wine overseas of recent has been exciting.
Yep.
Being at Pro Wine and Vinexpo and just seeing the roar in the hall around the Australian wine area compared to the rest of the hall where there wasn't much happening at all was a really proud moment. But it takes a long time for that to translate to dollars in your pocket in the wine industry, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But where do you see your place, your particular place in all that?
Well, we'd like to continue on the journey of experimenting with some new varieties, not going down the road of having a heap of alternative varieties, but using, the good work of other people that are looking at all of those varieties and the suitability in our region to really hand select the ones that suit our site and the kinds of wines that we like to make for people. And they also should be wines that can be grown with little fuss and input.
Yeah.
We don't want anything that's high maintenance.
No, who does?
No. I mean, if you're doing things on a smaller scale, it's quite rewarding to prune the hell out of something and watch it grow. But we can't do business like that in the Riverland.
And sharing that story of the Riverland going forward, is that a real active focus?
Yeah, I think it's like a big part of our brand story, I think, to share how our family is part of a community, because I think there's lots of people in our country that live in the city now, but they have connections to the country. It might be the generation before or the generation before that, but they've all got this connection to a farm where they once went on a holiday, or they stayed when they were a kid, or their grandparents or something like that. And so everyone wants to feel that again, and wine tells that story. You just buy a bottle and there's the story, and you get to feel that. So I think our brand, it's family and community project focus, can sell that feeling of nurtured, country, community, warm, fuzzy feeling. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks so much, Sheridan, for sharing that story. And there's lots of ups and downs to it, but having strong characters like you and your family and the community is hugely important. So as long as you're around, they'll be in a better position.
Oh, I'll try and hang on.
Maybe, keep working on the self-care stuff to
the self-care,
ensure the longevity.
And the bank
manager. You've known since a kid that you've got to go be nice to the bank manager.
Yeah, I'll buy my bank manager a massage before I have one myself, I reckon.
That sounds good.
Thanks for listening. Head to the Wine Grape Council of South Australia website for links and further resources. This is part of a bigger conversation, so feel free to share this podcast with your mates and look after yourselves. Cheers.